Okay, folks, so here we have a very simple still life that's set up, and I'm just going to point out to you the perceived colors. Okay, so the local colors of the object is pretty much simple. If you look, blue bowling pin, this sort of donut, very kind of like neon, orangey, red-orange color, this green bucket. So these are your objective colors or local colors, all right? I would just call them objective colors, the colors of the object. Now, when we place them together in a still life, you will notice that now, for example, that bowling pin, just focus on the bowling pin, that you'll notice that that blue of that bowling pin starts to shift, especially this lower part of that bowling pin. So it's no longer that blue, it's no longer the color of the object, but now it's picking up some of that reds in this donut and picking up some of the greens from this bucket. So if you look, some of that red is bouncing into this area of that bowling pin. So now, if you look in this area where my skewer is pointing, you'll notice that it has a hint of violet. Why? Because this red orange mixes in with this blue and it gives you a violet hue. Okay, so now the blue of that bowling pin has shifted and started to show some violet hues, all right? And then in this area here, in the shadow, light's hitting the bucket, the green of the bucket bouncing back into the bowling pin, and now there's a hint of that green in that bowling pin. So now you have a little bit of sort of blue-green in the bowling pin area here because it's picking up some of that green from the bucket. Okay, so this is what we're talking about, perceived colors. So if you look at the core shadow right here, and in some instances here, you may notice that might be a slight, and it might be a little bit tough to notice this, but really try and see if you can see maybe a hint of violet in here as well. So it's picking up some of these colors, and this bowling pin here, you could tell that there's shift in terms of temperature, and that's another thing too about color. If you learn, when we talk about color, when we make color drawings, we also have to consider the shifts in temperature. So whether the color, whether some areas of the object that's being illuminated is warmer, some areas in the shadow is a little bit cooler, so do pay attention to that as well. So, and look at this shadow as well. You'll notice that this shadow here has such a strong reddish quality, reddish quality coming from that donut again, and then it starts to shift and it starts to pick up this sort of green hue from the bucket. Okay, so then when you make that drawing, please do not put black in your shadow. Okay, your shadows are not black, all right? So you should look for the color in the shadow and see what color that is. Here you notice it's some red moving on to some greens. And then at the back in here, it feels like it's definitely like a darker sort of green, and then it might be hard for you to see here, but I'm looking in between the donut and the bowling pin, and the car shadow becomes a little bit more purple. Okay? So that's pretty much perceived colors, and you need to pay attention to those when you draw. Okay? Then in the highlight too, if you put the highlight and you just put white, that white will be too cool. It'll be light enough, but it will be too cool. So you probably will need to add a hint of yellow in that white to warm up that highlight, because that light source is this really warm light source and it's illuminating the still life. So some of that will show up here in that highlight area, that warmness. So if you were to use your pastels and you just put like a cool white in there, you get a nice bright value, like a light value, but you don't have the correct temperature of that highlight. So you need to add a hint of yellow to that. And I'll explain that further as we work on the pastel drawing.